Hello, my name is Helen Sue Gorman. I'm a member of the Old Orchard Blossoms Grandmothers Group in Toronto and a lover of chocolate. Yes, I have tasted the delicious chocolate made by the Hadhad family. I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone from all across Canada and beyond to our very first author event. We are so pleased to present you with this opportunity. As you are joining us from many places near and far, we acknowledge the traditional First Nation, Inuit, and Métis owners and caretakers of those lands. Filming for today's event has been done in Nova Scotia and Mi'kmaq, the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and in Toronto, the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. Now I would like to introduce you to our author, John Tattrie. Just a few years ago, many of us were learning about the dire situation in Syria through newspapers, television and radio news, and interviews. Some of us also knew of groups of Canadians sponsoring Syrian families coming to start a new life in Canada. John, as a journalist for CBC News in Halifax, quickly realized the story of the Hadhad family needed to be shared in a book that he was well qualified to write. He holds a master's degree in writing from the University of King's College. He is the author of 2 novels and 5 books of fiction about Nova Scotia citizens whose compelling stories needed to be told. His writing has been published in many Canadian newspapers and magazines, and he spent extensive time getting to know the Hadhad family to ensure the heartwarming story he has told is completely accurate and had been given their approval at every stage of the writing process. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce Tareq Hadhad, an award-winning entrepreneur, the 2020 RBC Top 25 Canadian Immigrant Award, a TED Talk speaker, the CEO of his family's thriving chocolate company, Peace by Chocolate, an enthusiastic member of the community of Antigonish, and a very proud Canadian citizen. All these accomplishments and more have happened since Tareq arrived in Canada in December 2015. He came alone 1 month ahead of the rest of his family and has moved forward with positivity, joy, determination, and enthusiasm ever since, never forgetting the life his family left behind in their beloved country of Syria, yet always looking ahead to the future. And last but not least, it is also my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Nancy Moon. Nancy is a member of the Bram Grand's Grandmothers Group in Brampton. She is a retired elementary school teacher, a voracious reader. Ask Nancy for a book to read and she will quickly have at least 5 excellent suggestions. An active contributing member of her Brampton community, a sponsor of a refugee family from Eritrea, and also a lover of chocolate. Please do settle in to enjoy our event.
Thank you, Helen Sue. First of all, may I say what a pleasure it is to meet you, John. John, your book was a delight. Some of the other grandmothers were saying before we started taping that it moved them to tears and they had laughter. And yes, you did a magnificent job. I'll be really interested in talking to you about your writing process.
Thank you, yeah.
And Tareq, I feel like I'm with a superstar. Within months of arriving in Canada, you'd already met the Governor General, the Prime Minister, the Premier of Nova Scotia, the President of the United States. Thank you for spending time now with grandmothers.
Oh, no, thanks so much for having me. I feel I'm also with 12, what do we have now? 12 superstars on this call as well. So thanks so much for having me. Really, really an honor for me to be with you. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. Tareq, I was struck by your observation that the refugees you saw in Lebanon seem to be forever repeating the same endless day. How did your determination to not become locked in that cycle change your fortunes?
Well, since we arrived in Lebanon, we knew that we have no option other than to survive and thrive. And we have no solution in life other than to adapt and adjust and look for better opportunities. You cannot look at any position of darkness and determine that this is your future. You have to look to the light at the end of that tunnel. It was such a long tunnel for everyone living in refugee camps, living as refugees who just have nothing really to live by for their everyday. And when our family arrived in Lebanon, even though we arrived with nothing, but we knew we did not lose our skills and our talents, right? Like this is something you do not lose in a war. It's something you do not lose after a brutal chemical weapons were attacking your neighborhood. It's just something that no one really can take out of you unless you are dead. As long as we were alive, we had that spirit that we are human beings and we can adapt, we can adjust. Just going in refugee camps and looking at the faces of mothers who were so afraid on their kids, and they were just really trying to keep them alive in the cold of the winter when it was like -10. In some of the valleys in Lebanon, in Bekaa Valley, it was -10, and kids were living in a tent that separates them from the outside. There's no heating system. They just had one blanket that shared the entire family. And that was during the time when I was volunteering as a healthcare volunteer with many mobile clinics with the UNHCR, WHO. It was pretty tough, to be honest. Just sitting there and really seeing those families struggling to survive the day after another. It really gave me the sense of responsibility when I was able to give my healthcare experience and give something that I owned at that time. The only thing I owned when I was a refugee is time. I owned time, and I wanted to give that time to help others. And that time actually was translated into a feeling of satisfaction and the feeling of giving back and the feeling of also supporting and helping those who need. And I'm sure many of you who helped Syrian refugees had that feeling of helping others to restart their lives. So thank you for all the work you have done. You have changed many lives. You have no idea how much gratitude to these families and these refugees really hold for you. Because when I came from Lebanon, I knew it was a life-changing moment for my family since the time I was on that plane from Beirut to Toronto on December 18th, leaving Lebanon and looking back at really what our family had survived. And just imagining now looking on our social media and from my connections still back home in Lebanon and in many refugee camps, as I was volunteering to my connections with not-for-profit organizations, I know how much suffering refugees are living through the pandemic right now with no distancing. The social distancing is like a luxury in a refugee camp that no one really can even have it. It's really challenging. But at the time when I was still there, I remember very well the challenges, and I'm really glad that Canada has opened the doors for as many refugees as possible. There's still a lot of work to be done to bring many. We survived, but many did not yet, and we are still doing whatever we can to help them from where we are today, from the position of our family and our company, and the success we have had. Because if you are successful, it's your moral responsibility to lift others with you to success, and also to keep others safe, because that's really the whole reason since our arrival in Canada is to give back and support others to live in peace. While I remember so well, it's impossible to be in peace in refugee camps.
I think, though, it's magnificent what you said about time. And for some people, just even in a pandemic, they see this as imposed time that they've lost control, but you seize the time, and that's what really impresses about the story. And John, for you, you were writing about refugees to an audience that may or may not have a lot of familiarity. In the community where I live here in Brampton, the visible minority is the majority. But there will be many of your readers who do not live amidst refugees. What did you see as your takeaway message in your book?
I think before meeting the Hadhads, I had written about refugee crises as a journalist and had met people, a lot of people from Kosovo, for example, who came to Nova Scotia in the 1990s and met them as adults. And so had a bit of a sense of what it meant. But to have that special license the Hadhads granted me to talk to them in depth for such a long period of time it really made it personal for me and made me realize that a refugee is kind of like a false concept, really. It's regular people who, you know, it'd be like talking about fire victims, you know, meaning people whose houses burned down. It just happens to anybody. It could happen to me, and it happened to the Hadhads, and that it's something you get thrown into. It's a situation you're in, you know. And Tareq tells that story about when he was given a number to represent himself as a refugee, and he said, "I'm not a number, I'm a name." And I think that's what it is that it's a situation you're thrown into, and you endure as best you can, and you get out the other side as best you can. But that was my takeaway, and how different from immigration it is in some important ways. With immigration, you know, people look for a better future, plan to move to the country, they want to move there. But with a refugee, many people in Syria had wonderful lives and wonderful futures they wanted to live in Syria. They did not want to leave. You know, sometimes in the West, especially in Canada and America, we can imagine that everybody wants to get here at the slightest opportunity. But many, you know, the Hadhad families and many others I spoke to had no desire, had never crossed their mind, no more than it crosses my mind that maybe I'll take my family and uproot them and move them to the Middle East. It just was, I would say, for many Syrian refugees, just as foreign a concept, just as unlikely. But yet once you're in it, you know, and once the whole building's on fire and you're pressed up against the glass window, you got to jump out that window. Where else are you going to go? There's no safety anywhere else. And so I realized that really it is being forced to your last options, down to the last few options. And for the Hadhads, that Canada option, you know, mentioned in that taxi ride Tareq took back to see his family, was that window. And luckily for them, you know, there was a whole team of people in Antigonish with the blankets underneath the window ready to catch them and help them heal and move on to their lives.
But interestingly enough, in coming to Antigonish, you were, John calls it almost an amputation. There was no Syrian community to greet you. Do you see that as an advantage or a disadvantage?
Certainly an advantage in the beginning, because at that time I had to get into the mood of rebuilding my family as I arrived, right? I made my own sense of community, I had my own sense of family, my own sense of safety. Even though there was a language barrier when I arrived in Canada, I did not speak English fluently. I really came here with a few words just to survive. And then I was just grasping on these sentences as I was arriving in Nova Scotia. And the first sentence that a Cape Breton man told me was, "How is she going by?" I'm like, I need a dictionary really to know as I'm going in the country, what do people mean? It was a really lovely experience just to build my own community, I would say. And then the Syrian community has been growing since then. Now I guess there are more than 100 Syrians in my 5-kilometer circle as a family that they have came to Antigonish and around the surrounding areas. So love has been just growing since then. So I would say I've been really blessed to have people who were surrounding me with love and kindness since the moment that they have arrived. And they made me feel that I have a family of 5,000 people. That's the entire town. Everyone was coming to me. Everyone saw me at the library in the first few days. They came to me and they were shaking hands. I felt really, I'm at that time, I was like the prime minister, you know. I was sitting at the public library and we were like, yeah, you just arrived like a few days ago. I was getting introduced to the community, sitting in cafes on Main Street, and we were like really coming, asking me, what do I need? And that story of the Newfoundland woman calling on my cell phone, it was very interesting. Those who read the book know that when I got my first cell phone number, and then the woman called me, she thought she's calling her daughter. And I was like, no, this is the wrong number. And she was like, oh, who's this? I'm like, this is Tareq. And she was like, oh, who's Tareq? I'm like, no, who is this? And the conversation lasted for like 17 minutes, even though it was the wrong number. And the woman kept asking me, well, like, how is the weather up there in Antigonish? I was like, it was great. The story of the kindness actually that lasted longer. The woman and her husband saved my name and my number after they knew I was a newcomer to the country. And they kept calling me every second month to check on me. You know, when I talk about the maritime kindness, the maritime loveliness, it's a generalization in Canada, but certainly in Nova Scotia, it's a reality. And in the Maritimes all across the Atlantic provinces, you really see it and you really feel it, the warmth in the hearts and the open arms. that people really receive and welcome immigrants. And this is really what makes Canada great.
You told one of the stories. I kept it together because fortunately I had read it before. But John, that was one of the times I cried in the book, just to know that woman and the fact that she kept calling to check. No wrong numbers.
And that was one of the few stories, maybe the only story that Tareq said that has to go in there. It has to go in there.
Yeah.
Whatever else with the book, that story has to be in there.
It was a beautiful story, to be sure. John, you did a fabulous job, though, at being inclusive and telling the stories of so many of the Antigonish sponsors and really giving the richness of their lives as well. And I thought that was a wonderful side to it. I felt there was so much to learn from them, just what they tried to, how they tried to educate themselves before Tareq and the family arrived. And I just wondered if you were struck by that, almost that African saying, it takes a village to raise a child, that it takes a village to welcome a refugee family.
Yeah, and I've got a very special copy of Peace by Chocolate here, where you can see, I don't know if you can see, yeah, there you go. My copy is signed not by me, but by Tareq and his family, and by everybody in Antigonish that I could grab when we managed to have our book launch in October. We were lucky enough to do an in-person one in Antigonish. And yeah, that was for me, I would say the priority was to tell the family story, and especially the women's stories, Tareq's mother, Shanaz, his sister, Ala, and Batul. And just because Tareq had, as the head of the company and the public face, had shared his story, but I knew that there were so many important stories in the rest of the family to tell. And we talked about getting out of that kind of depression in Lebanon. Your mother, Shanaz, played an important role in kind of stepping up and seeing that she was the one to guide you into Canada. But also for me, growing up in Nova Scotia, I'm born and raised here and knew Antigonish fairly well as a visitor, not as a local, but I knew all of these people were back there, and I would see all these things, and you would see, you know, when the tiny shed opened, you would see people in the background working, but they were so humble, they never put their names in the papers. So it became a bit of a challenge for me to find everybody, because they just, other than on their Facebook group, it was just so matter of fact. Nobody there was kind of boasting about it or making a big deal. It was just like, well, I've got some free time, so I'll go wire this house. I've got, you know, I can lift some gravel, I can teach English. And so everybody just pitched in, and I think once everybody starts to pitch in, then it just seems, why would anybody put their name forward? So for me, that was a goal, to meet those people. And Frank Gallant was the first person I kind of met. I think I bumped into him at something, or his name came up a couple of times, and he was instrumental in kind of introducing me to this secret network, this sort of underground railroad of people working flat out. And for the Hadhads, but of course for the other families, the 100 families or so that Tareq is talking about, in the 2016 census in the Antigonish County, there were 0 Syrians living there. And so that community that sprang up was pivotal. And for me, the book opens with a little bit about the history of chocolate and the chocolate tree, the sacred chocolate tree. And that was a defining metaphor for me, was the transplant of the tree. You know, if you have a new tree, a seedling, you need to put it in an incubator. You need to have it in a nursery. You need to care for it so it can grow and become a mighty tree that can offer shelter and food and all those wonderful things. And I feel that's the same with newcomer families in general, and especially refugees who have not come by plan or by choice or bringing anything really other than their talents and their time, is to understand that short-term intensive care to help them settle. It's not something you need to commit, you know, the Hadhads don't need a whole lot of support these days. They're a major employer in the town. They're important people in the town. So that window of arrival, that protectiveness that the community was able to provide, really benefited the whole community. And especially in rural areas where they need new people and new businesses and new families. The people in Antigonish, it just always seemed to them like, what are you even talking to us about this for? Of course you would do this. It's the human thing to do. It's better for our community. They were kind of baffled that other places hadn't figured this out.
And I was really inspired by all the people who have come together to help sponsor our family without knowing them. Like, they did not know us, right? Like, sometimes you get connected to a person overseas and you just, you know, try to bring him to the safe haven of Canada. But this group of people, they did not know us. They did not ask about our background, didn't ask about our ethnicity, about our religion, about what did we do in Syria. They had no idea. They only had our last name. They didn't even know how do I look like when I arrived there. Even though I was, they knew that I'm handsome more than Leonardo DiCaprio. That's the only thing. But then, like, I mean, to be honest, like they have, yeah, very. So
But you also came carrying a baby that they weren't expecting.
It was not mine, yeah. So to be honest, like seeing them at the airport at that time, and John put this into words so beautifully in the book. Coming there without knowing anyone from them, and they didn't know me, and they asked me, "Are you Tareq?" I'm like, "I am Tareq. How did you know my name?" And I don't know any one of you. And they were like, "We are sure you are Tareq. We are looking for it." And they were just carrying flowers and signs, and was in my name in Arabic and in English. It was a beautiful moment of humanity, pure humanity. Honestly, at that time in the airport, coming to the airport in Halifax. 2 hours away from Antigonish. You know, they drove 2 hours to the airport. They drove 2 hours back. That's 4 hours in December when it was snowing, just because they wanted to really bring me to safety and peace, and just because they believe that they have the ability to transform and change lives. So hopefully now I have that mission to change other people's lives, just because I was so inspired by them.
Okay. John, you mentioned women as being a big part of the inspiration when you were writing the story. I was impressed as well at your sensitivity that you had some special ways of interviewing to respect the Muslim customs as far as interaction between men and women. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, through the King's program, I had a great mentor named Wanda Taylor who helped me write the book and helped me think about it really conceptually. And she has this great story about kind of like an alien arriving on somebody's birthday and just trying to figure out the whole burning candles, and just the whole thing seems so strange. And it helped me to kind of to put myself in the shoes of not understanding, of thinking how different things are here and assuming I don't know what's normal. And so something as simple as a handshake in the olden days would cause a lot of problems, because you know, for most Muslim women, in particular Tarek's family, don't shake hands with men they don't know, and it's not something that would even cross our minds. But it's kind of the same as I don't hug people I don't know, and if I went to a country where suddenly people were hugging me and kissing me all the time, it would be very off-putting and confusing and uncomfortable for me. So I kind of took that as a starting point, and yeah, and so for interviewing them, like I'd say we got about halfway through the book, and I felt like I hadn't gotten their stories properly. I hadn't learned enough to really tell their story. So we had one lovely day where I took my two kids, my daughter Rosalind and my son Xavier, both turned 8 and 5 actually, and Tareq gave us a tour of the chocolate factory. So I was dad of the year that year. and we got to go and look at the chocolate and try the chocolate and smell the chocolate and have a wonderful time. And my wife, Giselle, who is a documentary, works in TV documentaries, stayed back and sat with Shanaz and Batul and Ala and spoke to them. And she was able to connect with them in a different way. And I think bringing our families together was wonderful. Our kids played together afterwards. It was just a good connection to kind of show them that, you know, a little bit more about my world in some ways, to be a bit more open with myself and my own life. And my wife just knew more what questions to ask, more what, you know, raising 2 young kids herself, she could just picture herself in Ala's situation. Ala's 2 kids, Omar and Sana, were about the same age as our kids when they were living as refugees. So she was able to think about things that I wouldn't have thought of. And that kind of broke down those barriers and set it up. And then I followed up with phone interviews to talk to them about some of the details of each of their journeys. And yeah, we were able to get there in the end. I think it was just being aware of all the invisible things. And we've all kind of had this with COVID, where suddenly nobody will shake hands. And at the book launch, people kept trying to shake Tarek's hand. I was coming in with the big axe saying, no, don't touch him. Don't touch him. But it was that kind of thinking, really, just to think more from their point of view and to hear their stories through their own voices.
You've been hinting at some of the family, and I know for a lot of us, when we finished the book, the stories weren't finished and we wanted to know more. So Tareq, can you bring us updates on the rest of your family? Now, your oldest sister, are she and her family still in Syria?
My oldest sister is still in Syria. Yes, I think we should have John. We should have a version 2.0 of the book coming next year. My oldest sister is still in Damascus. She's with her husband and her kids. She's still not being able to travel for sure. And certainly, as John finished the book, I think right in the middle of that pandemic, really early on, it was published just in October. But the situation there is certainly much more difficult in a country like Canada, first world country, very developed. All the resources are out there. Imagine a country like Syria just waking up from a devastating war. How the life could be there in a pandemic too. So add the double struggle to their lives. It's unimaginable, really unbelievable. The other family members, they are all doing well. My sister is still in Saudi Arabia with her kids and with her husband. Hopefully they will be in Canada. They should be in Canada soon. She is younger than me. And another, all of my siblings right here, they are still going to school. My brother Ahmad, my little sister Tareq, they are grade 9 and grade 10 now. So they are finishing up their high school. But my sister Batul, actually, she fell in love with, she found her love in Canada, which I was really happy, like for the news last year when they were by the end of 2019, at the beginning of 2020, they got engaged and they got married right on March 15. It was the last official event in town. It was unbelievable. They just did it right before everything was locked down. So it was really, really overwhelmingly happy event, just because they didn't know what to expect. It was very uncertain. People were really stressed. So we really just happy to enter the pandemic, the lockdown, with that boost of positivity with my sister's wedding. And my sister just got her baby actually in January. So the first Canadian born in the family time, was born in the last few weeks, and we're really excited for that too. But yeah, all my family are still involved in the business and in telling the story. They all believe really in the importance of sharing these important messages of resilience at the time of adversity. And they all believe that this story right now is so important to be told from the perspective, from the lens of my mother, who, she spends most of her days right now. She's just on video calls. She's talking to Syrian women across the town, across the country. And Syrian women, they're still back home struggling, and my father is the master chocolatier. As we are speaking right now, he's making magic in the factory. So yes, everyone in the factory, everyone in the family, they are all doing well. They're all staying safe. There are many more updates in the family and in the company that they are happening after we release the book. Certainly one of the biggest events that we are anticipating is all of our families, what they're excited for, is the launch of our new store in the city of Halifax that we have built in the past year. So everyone in the family is excited for that. Is where I'm sitting right now, actually. It's on the waterfront in Halifax. And let me show you, I'm going to show you this lovely peace sign that we have built. So it's just right.
And I'd love to show you my lovely.
Oh, that's great. So that's really where
tiling. Yeah, I wondered about that tiling behind you. I see some Syrian motifs in it there, familiar from the chocolate boxes.
Yeah. So this is an arch actually that was just inspired by the Syrian ancient architecture. It was a really piece, and for me, this color, teal, turquoise, light blue, is a representation of peace, comfort, and tranquility. And you used to find this in the Syrian houses, in the middle of each house, in the open, areas, in the open yards in the houses, the ancient houses. In addition to the arches, you found a fountain in the middle of the house, and lovely pure colors in the middle, from the exact same color of the arch, and the tiles behind me is light blue. Just gives a lot of, comfort to all of those stores sitting around it. And the fountain is very centered in the house. So when people sit around it, imagine sitting like in an evening after dinner and having dessert. And that's what we used to do when we used to go to one of my friends' houses. in Damascus. So when we used to share all the lovely stories, having a hot cup of tea after after 9 p.m. and really enjoying life and talking about it. So a lot of memories really that this color brings to me, and we cannot really wait. There are more stories that will be shared from the store. We'll be posting them on our social media as we go forward.
Lovely to hear stories of the architecture. I have to say, I was confused to try to understand about the house that you had in Damascus that started as a single story and then that grew to accommodate so many in the family. To us, 10 stories sounds like an apartment building.
Kind of, actually, but it was very accessible, from the inside. The way that the stairs were built, it was very accessible for people really to move in between apartments and in between the sections. So imagine in each floor. So my grandmother's house was really the biggest. Like the first floor was just like the foundation. And then as the building was growing up, when the family was just getting bigger, it was just, divided by, who my grandmother's loved more. So she loved us. So she loved us, and we were on the first floor. Actually, no, it's really all the love was equally distributed on everyone. But my grandmother's house was really the house of our lovely gatherings. When you read in the book, like every Saturday, having a dinner together, gatherings for lovely events like Mother's Day, when we have these secret gifts together. So the building itself was really a presentation of our family's cohesion, and the dinners on the weekends were the actual translation.
And I think, Tareq, partially it's probably to do with space being so precious in Damascus, and a lot of people in Syria wouldn't borrow money. Like here, you might borrow enough money to build the whole building and then pay it back over 20 years, but that's not the case there. So I think that's part of the reason, is that you build as you can afford. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that was actually one of the legacies that my grandfather wanted to have in the family. My grandfather died in a heart attack in 2005. And the legacy was that he said to us, do not get scattered. You should stay together. The entire family, my cousins, my uncles, my aunts, my grandmother, my father, my parents. So all of those family were staying together because we really loved seeing each other every morning. We loved, smelling the jasmine from the windows from my neighbors who were my cousins, right? And all of these lovely stories that we have shared, and we have talked about. We have smiled, we have cried, we have celebrated many events together. And certainly at that time when I was growing up, imagine being in downtown Toronto, right? And imagine having all of this, as John mentioned, all of this amazing spaces and really precious space that you cannot really expand further, but you can get higher in the building. So that was as well one of the main reasons when our family was growing up. It was an interesting concept that my entire family wanted to spread that out for their kids as the family was growing up, for the neighborhood. But that did not happen, and the war just broke out in the country.
And for me as a writer, one of the mantras I had when writing this was objects hold emotions. And when you're looking to capture the emotions people are feeling, people in the book, Tareq and his family, or the people reading the book, it's often you need a physical object to kind of sink them into. And so the house was just such a powerful, literally holding so many memories and emotions, but everyone can kind of relate to this sort of structure reaching tentatively into the sky to grow and grow and grow, and then the devastation when that's lost. So I was always looking for those objects that could hold the story in a way that just words or descriptions or scenes couldn't.
Mm-hmm. I relate to this. Just recently my grandmother's house was torn down, and she was the mother of 9 children, and her greatest wish was that her 9 children and her 27 grandchildren would always stay in close contact. And these are powerful things, but I think Canadians are often too nuclear. We just work in a small family.
Right.
So I found it powerful.
Another
aspect. Oh, I'm sorry.
I became, in talking about people not wanting to leave Syria, I became envious. I really admired what his family had built, what they built in Canada, but what they built in Damascus, and the whole way of life in Syria. It's too easy sitting in Canada to think that Syria is just the government or just the war or just the rebels, but not a fraction of a percent of Syria. Most of Syria is people, just regular people living their lives and beautiful lives in a beautiful ancient city, which I would love to visit one day. It just seems it was such a good life there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, absolutely. People there were always talking about staying in the country to give back and get it better. Certainly was not an easy life for many other families. Our family was so blessed and so privileged to have been able to build that successful life and to build a company and expand it. But many other families were really living under, especially outside the city in Damascus, were living under poverty lines with no accessibility to healthcare, no schools, right? Like no services outside of Damascus. So that's really the reason why people in 2011 were like, they were really fed up with the corruption. They were so fed up with inequality and they wanted to speak out. So that's how everything really started in 2011. But everyone who visited Syria, not only really was born in it, really loved it. And we have been able to notice so many of the tourists who came to Syria at that time, and have been really privileged to meet many of them, that they were really stunned by the beauty of the country and the kindness of people in Syria. And I can really connect, the two cultures, the Syrian culture and the Canadian one, in a way of hosting those who are in need. Syria welcomed many refugees from the surrounding countries like Iraq after the war in 2003, like Palestinian refugees, even refugees during the Second World War. From Europe, they came to Syria. So just thinking about that for a moment, I'm just really so blessed that Syria is my home by birth, but Canada is my home by choice. And when I merge these two homes together, it just makes me who I am today.
The sense of giving back comes clearly from what you're saying just there. And I think that was another part of your story that impressed me so much, that within 5 months of being in Canada, your family was already looking for a way to extend is it zakat, charity, to give back. And so you reached out to the people from the fires in Fort McMurray. Can you talk about the importance of charity to your family?
It's an important pillar. Zakat was certainly a pillar in Islam, and for our family, just giving back to Canadians who have welcomed us with open arms. My family were watching the news in May 2016, and we were all really tearful just seeing Canadians leaving their homes, losing them in the blink of a moment. And we were connecting that to our story, and we were like, we are now living in peace. What's the worst that could happen to us in 2016 in Antigonish? Like, we have our house, we have our business just started, a few $100s of our profit, when we were starting, we're like, yeah, let's just donate them. And then the business grew to a few $1,000s and we were donating them. Then the business grew again. And it was just really that whole concept of, if you are able to give back to those who helped you, then this is not really a privilege, this is a moral responsibility. And we feel it as human beings, especially at the time when we arrived in Canada. And we knew the sense of losing everything. It's like having everything in Syria. Imagine your life being in Syria, having everything, and then you lose it. Just within moments, we lost a factory. Within moments, we lost many family members. Within moments, we lost the house. And when we were in Lebanon, we were just reflecting. So I was so really happy that our family got the chance to come to Canada. But before that, I was also still thinking about the way, why did we get into that? Like, what happened in Syria that we lost everything in a blink of a moment? And it came to me in Lebanon. Once we get in Canada, the first thing we will do is give back and share what we have with others. And I really encourage Canadians at this time really to look to those who are suffering the most in the community and always be willing to help them, because the law of reciprocity, whatever you give today, I will come back to you tomorrow. But even if you're not waiting for it to come back, just for the sense of giving to those human beings who are suffering around the world right now, I think it's a great thing to do before anything.
And when Tareq became a citizen 14 months ago, Premier Stephen McNeill, then Premier Stephen McNeill, said to all the newcomers, one of your special obligations is to bring your own culture to Canada. You're not to leave it behind. You have an obligation to bring it. And I think that's one of the areas of Syrian culture that Canada and North Americans in general can really benefit from. I think we have an idea that, what I can earn what I can earn, and what I've got is mine. And if I'm nice, I'll give some of it away to other people. But in Syria, there's a sense that everything is a gift. Your life is a gift. Your prosperity, your success is a gift, a gift from God and specifically. And that, if somebody showers you with gifts and you give a little bit of that gift away, you're not going to toot your own horn. And they see it in a quite a fundamentally, profoundly different way than I think a lot of Canadians do. And then we're similar to with the families, here it's so common to think, well, there's a better job out west. Of course, our kids will move thousands of miles away and we might never really see them again. Not sort of questioning that money is the most important thing, but isn't family important too? So I think those values of family, of giving back to the community, and not giving back as out of generosity really, but out of obligation, as you say, that you give today while you have extra, and you hope that tomorrow, if you are short, that there are people that will help you out.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, we come back to the foundation that, giving and sharing is, I think, a privilege also to live in a just society, right? To give to those who are not fortunate to have what you have. At the end of the day, it's all the human aspect. It's like, as my dad said, chocolate is like people, right? You are born raw ingredients. You grow up and life stir you and heat you up, and then the final product is what you share with others, and then you are put into the mold of adulthood and the mold of society. So connecting chocolate in everything we were doing since we came to Canada is certainly a major aspect of our culture that we have brought to this country.
We are the richer for it, and we thank you for sharing that culture with us. One question when we talked about the family, I didn't know about your sister Allah. Has her husband been located?
He has not actually, no.
Okay.
So the devastating news, that she tries to move on in life, and it's sometimes difficult when you have no idea what have happened to someone in your family. I think that's really the most difficult part for my sister, but my sister Al is certainly the strongest person in the family. She has suffered the most, she has lost the most, and we are all, we're all there for her. And I really hope that some good news will come sooner or later.
Yeah.
It'll be
As
8 years, and about now 8 years ago, won't it? I imagine she keeps that anniversary in her heart.
Yes, to be sure. To look forward, John, do you have a next book in mind?
I do, yeah. It's always funny as the writer, because for me the richest, the most immersed I was in the Peace by Chocolate story has been over the past few years. So by the time the book comes out, I've done all that I can do. So my wife, my family, everyone has heard about the Hadhads so much for the last few years. But usually by the time the book comes out, I've turned my attention to the next project. And yeah, I think it's going to be, there was a friend of mine named Charles R. Saunders, who I worked with about a decade ago, and just knew him as an important Black journalist in Nova Scotia and a Black author of nonfiction here. And he died last year and ended up in an unmarked grave in a series of sort of tragedies. And nobody knew that he died until September. But once news came out, it lit up this global community of people who loved his fantasy fiction. I had no idea about this, but he was known as the father of sword and soul. So he took the Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien type world and put it in Africa, put it in a Black world, and just had such an impact on people's lives. Like people, he profoundly changed their lives. And some people, he had a best friend for 45 years, but they never met in person. They only spoke on the phone once. So I realized that Charles was this Gandalf-like figure to very many people. And I was one of the few people who knew him personally. So I think I'm going to dig into his life and how he came to write those books, and how he came to meet such an obscure end.
Fascinating. What a wonderful direction again. Thank you for sharing that. And Tareq, 5 years from now, where will Tareq be?
it's always impossible, honestly, to answer future questions, because if you ask me in 2015 or 2016, where would I be in 2021? I would never really imagine to be in such a position that I'm so lucky to be in. And hopefully in 5 years, we will uh, focus more on the company's growth across the Canadian market, the US market. The company now is taking all of my time, the attention to get our products to everywhere in the country, many major distribution networks, and hopefully we're opening an export market in the US. We just finished our export planning in November last year. So hopefully that would take us some time, but at the end of the day, I'm also looking forward to many other projects that we really can't wait to get them released. We have a movie that is going to be released later this summer. Hopefully we'll see that in movie theaters on online streaming platforms. But I'm really looking forward to be sharing this story more and more and more. And I can't wait for the company to be one of the top chocolate companies in the country, because that's my passion and that's my goal, just to rebuild the family legacy, because Canada is the second largest country in the world. There is nothing we cannot do. There is a place for everyone. When people usually say that, immigrants, especially who are hesitant about immigration, that they say immigrants take places, they take away from people, which is a very wrong statement, because as a country, we are so enriched by many cultures. We are so enriched by many talents. We're so enriched by those who come here to share what they have and really to enhance our understanding of others. And I was really lucky, because in Canada, just being in a city like Halifax, and when I was walking on the boardwalk just to the store, I heard at least 4 languages. I did not used to hear that when I was in Damascus. I did not used to really even understand how vast the world is and how similar we are as human beings, right? We share a lot. So hopefully in the next 5 years, we'll be focusing more on bringing the world together. Hopefully we'll see the world recover from the pandemic. And as a company, we will also be expanding, as I mentioned, our market further. On me personally, if you read the book, you know that my passion is in medicine. So many people still ask me if I want to go back to medicine, if I still have the opportunity. I always say that it's never too late to become a physician. And it will happen when it's the right time. If it's not the right time, that will not happen. And I always see that the world is open for possibilities. I never know. I might even change my path from entrepreneurship to politics, or from politics to being something else. I really have no idea right now about what the world might bring to me. But as I mentioned, I'm really lucky to have all of those opportunities around me. And I always see myself in the next 5 years as chasing, my future Tareq. So when I get to when I get to 2026, I'm like, did I reach my goals? And I'm like, oh no, there's still a lot for me really there are a lot of stuff to be done. So I will keep chasing that self of me until I reach really my ultimate goals of hopefully seeing everyone not having to live our experience again, not having to leave their homes, not having to live in a situation where they don't know what your next day is going to bring. So there will be a time in the future, hopefully, when our story will be told to millions of people around the world, and they will understand the blessing of having a place to call home and having a safe family and living in peace.
Thank you. Beautifully said. We'll watch with eagerness to see the next 5 years, and we'll watch for John's new book. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tareq, it's great to see you again. I miss being able to call you up and ask you what you had for breakfast, or what clothes you're wearing, or what you're thinking and feeling. It's great to see you, and great to see the new shop.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, John, as well. This is really an amazing conversation. Nancy, it was really a great chat, and we're really looking forward to seeing what the world is going to bring. And John, I look forward to getting the first copy of your new book.
Absolutely.
I have to be the first one to read it.
And the new store in Halifax will open when? You've been stalled by the pandemic?
Well, actually, Not really. Nova Scotia, we have been really lucky to live in a world almost free of COVID until we built this store and we're planning to do an event for ribbon cutting on Thursday. But there are new restrictions that they came in place. So the ribbon cutting is postponed until April. But the store officially is opening this Friday to shoppers.
right.
So people will start coming to the store at the Queen's Mark here at the heart of downtown Halifax, just across from the ferry. And it's really exciting for us. So it's only a few days left and everyone is working really hard, putting 15 and 17 hours a day between store manager and our staff and our team and our family. So we're really, really excited about this step. It's going to be a significant, I think, advance and progress in the family's journey so far in the country.
I think so. Joanna, I'll ask Joanna to join us now.
So I'm Joanna White from the Old Orchard Blossoms, one of the groups, grandmother groups in Toronto. And I'd like to say a really huge thank you to John and Tarek on behalf of the two grandmother groups, just for taking the time to be with us and giving us such a fascinating and inspiring insight into the Hadhad story and your successes. It was such a pleasure to listen to both of you. And in support of the Grandmothers campaign, we really, really appreciate you taking the time to do it. Nancy, thank you for being such a gracious and relaxed moderator. It was just like a chat between old friends. It was really lovely. And to all of you watching, a reminder that although the event is free, it's also a fundraiser for the Stephen Lewis Foundation's Grandmothers campaign. The grandmothers and grandothers of the campaign stand in solidarity with the grandmothers of sub-Saharan Africa, and they raise money to help them in their continuing efforts to raise their grandchildren who've been orphaned by AIDS. Grassroots groups like ours are all across Canada and now in England, Australia, and the United States. And we support the grassroots organizations in Africa. So we really hope that you'll make a donation to our cause. Thank you in advance. The link can be found in the comments section underneath the video. This event will be available online from March the 13th to the evening of March the 20th. So if you've enjoyed it when you watched it, I encourage you all to share the link with your families and friends. You can do it for families and friends all over the world. I've sent mine to England and changed the time so that they know when to watch it if they want to see it for the first time. And that's the wonder of the online conversations. You can have people from all over the world join in. If they want to register for the event, they can register at eventbrite.ca. John, this is for you. I just finished reading your book last night at 1 o'clock in the morning. I loved it. And it was one of those books that I was actually really sorry to finish. You know, when you get to the end of a book and you're just like, oh,
Me too.
that was your book.
Thank you.
Loved it. And it was so well written. I would encourage everybody to go out and buy and read a copy. It's just wonderful. It's readily available at most independent bookstores, as well as Indigo and Amazon. So rush out and get it. And also, if you're anything like me, you'd be looking for a little bit of chocolate to nibble on while you read the book. So while you're reading, I've been very good. I haven't actually opened this at all.
Wow, such patience.
I know. Actually, I was quite tempted to have a little nibble while I was listening to you, Tarek, and I had to sit on my hands. So you know what's going to happen now.
Thanks for doing marketing for us, Joanna. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Anyway, it was a wonderful event. I loved it. I felt when I finished the book that I knew Tarek, I knew you and your family so well, and you just feel like friends to us. So thank you again. You are an inspiration, and it was wonderful.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.